Here we are today at Anley Pond Nature and Historic Preserve. We're going to take a look and see what type of spring season wildflowers we can find. And to start off with, we see these yellow blooms. Take a closer look. You can see the 5-part flower, very glossy petals, very distinctively a buttercup. Determine which one. You want to, of course, take a look at the leaves. And while those are fairly good characteristic, this is the best characteristic to determine this specific species of buttercup. Look at the underside of the petals. You see the sepals, those little pointed bracts that are pointed down the stem. That is unique to this species of buttercup. And these are bulbous buttercup. And they're so named because of a bulb that forms on the part of the root. And we're going to see if we have enough sunshine here to show this tiny little blue flower that's in amongst the grass. I'm going to give you a closer up look. Hopefully it'll stay in focus. You see, it's a very, very pretty flower. Hopefully I can get it back in focus for you. This is corn speedwell. And here is another one of our wildflowers. This is mouse-eared chickweed. If you look closely at the leaves coming off, they have very fur-covered, very fine peach-like fuzz. Mouse-eared chickweed. And another one of our blooms we see on this shrub. Unfortunately, this is an invasive. It quickly covers a lot of area. See the white blooms, and then you see the yellow blooms. They open up white, and as the flower ages, starts to wither away, it turns yellow. This is Morrow's honeysuckle, one of our invasive honeysuckles. Now we're on the woodland portion, and one of my favorite woodland wildflowers, spring wildflowers, is starflower. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to get you a close-up look like I'd like to show you. I don't know if it'll show up well enough in this lighting, but this beautiful star flower, if you see it, there we go, you see it in the sun, and it has a very silky appearance to the petals. This is star flower, one of our really wonderful spring woodland wildflowers. And of course, also in this habitat, we're going to find a lot of ferns, and here we see a cluster of cinnamon ferns that are all still unfurling. Each of the two types of fronds, the fronds that are here on the side, the smaller ones that are unfurling, those are all leaves, whereas this tall one here, a little bit different structure to it. When it unfurls, that single frond is going to be what's called the fertile frond. It will actually be the one that has the reproductive capability. It'll have spores in it, whereas the other ones are vegetative, and they'll have the leaves. The very distinctive woodland fern, and this is called cinnamon fern because the fertile frond becomes a very distinctive cinnamon brown color when it gets ripe. Now we're seeing the blooms on a really nice specimen of highbush blueberry. This shrub you're looking at, all of it is the blueberry shrub. It's really quite an old one. As you can see, quite a few blueberries blooms are on it right now. If you'll join me at the end of July, I doubt we'll be doing a walk back here in person, but I will be doing an online event foraging for wild blueberries, and my focus will be highbush blueberry. Well, this is actually the species that brought me out into the woods today. I'm hoping we're going to find a little bit better looking specimen than this. Unfortunately, this is definitely past prime and bloom. This is painted trillium and gets its name from the white petals. Have a very distinctive, very pretty pink stripe at the base of each petal. Painted trillium. And we found a couple more. This has got a little bit brighter pink, give you an idea of just how beautiful that coloration is. This again is painted trillium. They're really at peak bloom right now. I'm going to come over and take a look at a few more over here. And the last couple of years, it's been really reassuring to come out and see here at Anley Pond Nature and Historic Preserve a number of these specimens. This is a really wonderful one right here. First couple of years, especially going back more than a decade when I did the wildflower inventory out here, I really only found one or two. The last couple of years, I found about close to 10 different specimens, so hopefully they're holding their own. Again, painted trillium. Well, this is a pleasant surprise. I think these are just a little bit early in blooming, as you can see by all of the buds that are still yet to come. This is definitely one of my all-time favorites of all of the spring season wildflowers. This is on a shrub. It's the only place I've ever found it of nearly 30 different locations throughout the capital region that I've been doing inventories on now for about 15 years. This is early azalea, and I wish this technology of the video, YouTube, would have a scratch and sniff component, because this is absolutely amazing, the perfume that comes off these flowers. It's very different than what some people refer to them as pinkster. Pinkster is actually odorless. These have a very distinctive perfume. These are early azalea. Now, as we have moved upstream of the pond and well into the woods, I've come across a couple of wonderful native wildflowers. These are definitely near the end of their blooming. Let's see if I can, there we go, get a closer look at those. You can see the 5-part flower, very small flower. And the leaves that go with these are these right here. This is dwarf ginseng. Definitely likes to grow where the water or the soil is quite damp. You probably heard my boot a moment ago. And if we look past the leaves of skunk cabbage, we find these really wonderful looking violets. And easy way to tell these violets is that if you look at the flower stalk, you see that hopefully you can see my fingers here, the flower is considerably elevated above the leaves. This is marsh blue violet. We have a nice collection on the log. It's moss covered. So we're in this wetland area, and again we have dwarf ginseng and marsh blue violet. And this is one of the first wild geraniums that I've seen this year. Try and get a little closer look for you. Beautiful pink bloom, 5 petals, a fairly distinctive leaf, and right next to it some first year May-apples, very, very large leaves, big umbrellas. Oh, and right next to it we have a blooming May-apple. The 2 leaves you can see here, and underneath, take a peek, is their beautiful flower. Very showy, quite large. This is May-apple, and it's the second year plant that has 2 leaves and it blooms. Otherwise, the first year plant just has 1 leaf. Come back in the middle of August if the fruit is still there. Wait for the skin to be translucent yellow. And it's a very aromatic, very tropical fruit type flavor. It's delicious. This is May-apple. And here we have a couple more ferns that are unfurling. See that they're still kind of very fuzzy. Hopefully it'll come a little bit better focus. But when you look at the head as it's unfurling, this is the fiddlehead stage, it's unfurling, you can see a very distinctive 3 branches. And here's a bigger version of that. Again, looking down from the top, the 3 parts to the leaflet. It's actually all 1 leaf. This is bracken fern. And going back and take a look at this fiddlehead stage, this one I'm focusing on right now, looking at, that would be about as late as you could take it. You lop off the fiddlehead portion, take the stem as much as is tender, remove the fuzz, collect a bunch of these, and they have a very nice mild asparagus flavor when you parboil or briefly cook them. This is bracken fern. Here we come across another cluster of cinnamon fern. As I mentioned before, you can see that this fertile frond in the center is starting to take on that cinnamon brown color. When it gets fully ripened, it'll definitely be a cinnamon brown in color. This again is cinnamon fern, very common in our wetland areas throughout the woods here at Anley Pond Nature and Historic Preserve. And yet another of our ferns that are just unfurling. This has a little bit of brown, kind of copperish color, which it'll again get in the fall. This is royal fern, and it has very distinctive branch pattern to it. Another one of our very beautiful woodland ferns, royal fern. And yet another fern that's very common in the woods. You can see a very distinctive pattern here. Take a closer look. We have over here a vegetative frond, and here, rather than the cinnamon fern, which has its own separate fertile frond, here we have leaves, and then we have a portion of the frond which is fertile, and then it continues again with vegetative. And so with leaves, fertile leaves, this is called interrupted fern for that reason. And we're going to take a look at yet another one of our ferns. This is sensitive fern. It's a very distinctive leaf form here, this frond. And what also makes it very distinctive is taking a look at last year's fertile frond. It's very resistant to weathering. Will stay up from all winter, all throughout the winter. So this is the fertile frond of this fern here, which is called sensitive fern. And again, it prefers damp soils, but really one of our most common of all ferns, particularly in this kind of a setting. Just a beautiful plant, and we have a nice variety of ferns here. Others that I do not know, I just continue to add to it, so it's really kind of a little wonderland here of the woodland ferns. This one again is sensitive fern. Now if it'll stay in focus for me, we've zoomed in on a really tiny little plant growing right along the trail here. Also likes damp soils, right next to the ferns. You can see the 4-part white flower. This is Pennsylvania bittercress. Now I'm stopping to take a look at these plants, even though there's no flower buds, unfortunately. But I was hoping to find these along our path. This spot here, very distinctive leaves and the venation, the pattern of the 4 leaflets, or the 4 leaves across from each other. This is bunchberry. It's actually a dogwood. Dwarf dogwood might be another name for it. But it has a nice little cluster of white flowers that cluster on top of the plant on these leaves, and then later on it gets a really crimson cluster of red berries. This is bunchberry. And this little wildflower is one of my favorites as well. And it has a surprising amount of perfume when you can find a lot of ground cover. You can see the leaves here, but there's a couple places along the trails here where when these are in full bloom, it smells just like lily of the valley. That's because these are called false lily of the valley, even though the flower looks nothing like lily of the valley. It has the exact same perfume. This is Canada Mayflower. And now along the trail we've come across a couple of birch trees, and if you look on up the stem, you can see that the white bark remains tight on these, whereas down here there's another cluster which we're walking up to. If you look up the stem, you can see that the bark is easily peeling on its own. Otherwise it's white bark. And these 2 species, the one with the loose white bark is white birch or paper birch. Native Americans, American Indians made birch bark canoes from these. And the 2 that were back there, actually that cluster of 4, that's called gray birch. A couple species of our native birch. As we wrap up our visit here, I'm going to have you take a look at chokecherry, one of our native cherries. Really fine teeth along the leaf margin, and a cluster of flowers called a raceme. Chokecherry.